Some background information is required, but basic facts are necessary to understand what happened after the critical event. My name is Grant Oster. When I went to graduate school, I got my master's degree. I met Laura when I was studying chemistry. I immediately fell in love. I think it took him 6 months after finishing his master's degree in art history to fall in love with me, but it happened. While I don't think we had much experience, my sex life was pretty good in my opinion, never expressing any complaints, and often seemed to climax with oral sex and vaginal penetration. We got married less than a year after she finished her master's degree and got a job in the same city. She taught at a community college, and I taught part-time at a state university and at a university consulting firm. 3 years after we got married, I dropped out of university and started working full-time as a consultant. I became an explosives expert, and one of the clients I worked for was the federal government. When our first daughter, Angela, was born, most of my work involved working for the government, which required a lot of travel. I knew it would be difficult for Laura, but I offered to resign and accept a full-time teaching position at a local university that had tried to hire me several times. But Laura loved the money my job brought me and the lifestyle it offered, and she encouraged me to keep pushing. I can survive. I can be self-sufficient. This is his smiling mantra. My travel activity didn't slow down much until our second daughter, Grace, was born 2 years after Angela. I again suggested a career change, but Laura again insisted that I stay in consulting because we now had a different population to feed, clothe, and educate. My schedule was disrupted for a time when the girls were 5 and 7, and with the help of my nanny, Laura decided to return to work while the girls were at school. He accepted an administrative position at a local university, focusing on the College of Arts and Sciences. For reasons I never understood, but didn't bother me because it made her happy, Laura was very interested in photography. We have a dozen photo albums documenting our life with our children. Another seemingly strange interest that Laura developed around this time was other languages, especially Italian. Laura traveled occasionally, including to Chicago, where she met with donors, professors, art schools, and also visited her college friend Gina, who was an exchange student in Italy at the time and now works in Chicago. Chicago. When the children were 8 and 10 years old, terrorist activity around the world made my skills extremely valuable to the federal government, and they hired me to work for them full-time for 2 years. I discussed this with Laura for several hours before agreeing to this assignment, which would require me to travel for over 2 years or more, sometimes leaving me away for more than a month. Laura told me to accept it and said that she and the girls would miss me, but they would be okay. My job with the federal government meant I would be gone for 2 Christmases in a row, when Grace was 9 and 10, and Angela was 11 and 12, and it was heartbreaking. Laura took her daughters to Chicago to visit Gina. I spoke to them on the phone every day during their week-long visit, and they seemed happy. Apparently, Gina had relatives, some of whom knew the girls before, and some of whom were the same age as our daughters. Finally, just before Thanksgiving, after more than 2 years working in the counterterrorism field, I returned to work as a full-time consultant with very little travel. Laura continued to travel occasionally, usually once a month for 2 or 3 days, mostly to Chicago, and I was happy to take on all the parenting responsibilities while Grace and Angela were away, although I occasionally went with her. I think it goes without saying that girls have closer relationships with their mothers than with their fathers. Although I had a good relationship with Grace and Angela, they never confided anything important to me and rarely asked my opinion on personal matters, although they always seemed to share personal information with Laura. It doesn't really bother me, except for one thing. They never talked as much as they usually did, talking about their trip to Chicago with their mother. Although not aloof, they never took the initiative to reveal any information and often changed the subject with a smile. Just before 18-year-old Grace went to an out-of-state college and Angela became a student at another out-of-state college, Laura experienced dark times. When I saw her crying several times, I asked her what happened. She explains this by saying that the nest is empty. He said he needed to take the girls shopping in Chicago, not shopping in Columbus. The trip was hastily planned and apparently required several long telephone conversations with Gina in Italian. Not understanding Italian, I accepted the details Laura told me. He had no reason to doubt her, even though she hadn't cried once in the 3 or 4 days before she left for Chicago with the girls. 3 days later, Laura returned from Chicago feeling more confident, although not quite back to normal. However, this is not surprising. Surprisingly, these three got very little out of the race. When I asked, I was told that some items would be sent later, some directly to the women's college address. I noticed that my sex life, which of course was never bad except for long periods of absence because I never cheated on Laura, improved while Grace was in school. I attribute this to the fact that Laura and I have grown closer as empty nesters, and I really appreciate the increase in frequency. Then the defining event in my story happened. One Thursday during lunch, I left work without telling Laura, who was at her usual place of work. He had planned to play 9 holes of golf, but the rain spoiled that wish. But I'm planning my next birthday. I wanted to throw a surprise party for Laura, so I talked to the planner and got to work. Around 3 p.m., a courier came to the door with a wooden box marked "Fragile" and delivered it on a cart up 4 flights of stairs in our home. "This is for Laura." I signed it, and with the help of the courier, we conveniently placed it in a permanent place in the living room with the sign, "This side up." The delivery of the box seemed strange to me. I couldn't imagine what was inside. I looked at the return address and it said, "Romano Photography Studio," and then the Chicago address, which I knew was downtown. I called Laura at work and told her the package had arrived. She was silent for a moment and then said, "Oh, it's work-related. They should have sent it to my office. I think they made a mistake. Don't open it and someone will send it to me. Bring it to the office tomorrow." Overall, this is a reasonable explanation except for 3 things. 1. After I first told her about the box, there was complete silence on the other end of the line for several seconds, so long that I almost asked her, "Are you still here?" Because Laura never missed this sentence. 2. The way he told me not to open it, it was more of an order than a request, and his voice was noticeably tense when he said it. Having worked in counterterrorism for several years, I have learned the importance of stress and nuance. 3. His entire behavior, it was not just an order not to open the box, was tense. My curiosity was so strong that I took a few photos of the box and entered the return address information into my laptop. The 4th thing that bothered me happened when Laura returned from work. She waved casually, ran over to the box, inspected it, apparently to see if she had damaged it, and was very rude when I asked her what was inside. "I'm not sure, but I'm looking forward to receiving a piece of art from an organization in Chicago that wants to display it at my school. I'll open it and take a look while I'm at work. Would you like me to help you open it now?" I asked not only to be a good person, but also to check his reaction. "Oh, no. We need to check the work to make sure there's no damage in case an insurance claim is required," casually muttered the omnipresent. Party work. The next morning before I left for work, 2 helpers from her school came and, under Laura's watchful eye, carefully loaded the box onto the school bus. When I say, "I'm looking forward to seeing the exhibition at school when it's over," it's not because I'm actually interested in seeing it. This was done to test Laura's reaction. Without making eye contact, she replied, "Well, I'm not sure that's the case, but of course, we'll let you know, when we meet." I decided to make an exhibition. Laura, always a fluent speaker, stuttered twice on the same topic in less than 14 hours. If this doesn't interest me, then nothing will. The 5th thing that made me nervous and suspicious was that Laura never said anything about the mystery box again. 2 weeks after the mysterious package arrived, I learned most of the publicly available information about Romano Photo Studio. This was the American branch of the world-famous photographer Piero Romano, whom you may have heard of in passing, but surprisingly, Laura never mentioned the man, even though it is all part of her photography hobby. At university, I often talked about artists and photographers. Piero has a unique style. Most of his images are characterized by partially authentic photorealism and other effects. He is considered a master of traditional photographic effects such as bokeh, blur, panning, rule of thirds, and long exposure, often combining several effects in a single photograph. He was also the only one to have a unique effect bearing his name, Romano Abilita Artista, which, as far as I know, roughly translates to Romano's art, but I've never seen it written in English. No person can copy and has difficulty putting words together. My best attempt is to say that some objects appear hyper-realistic, while nearby objects become blurry, and the color, if the photo is in color or shade, changes within the same object. But this description is not an injustice. Although much of the information about Piero is of intellectual and artistic interest, 2 facts caught my attention. The person responsible for running his studio was his niece Gina Romano Bianchi. I met a girl named Lau La whom I had only met once, and never in Chicago, known only by her female name Gina Bianchi. He died in a car accident on September 1st last year. His funeral took place on the 6th in Chicago. His body was later transported to the family grave in Italy. What a coincidence that around September 2nd, Laura was crying, probably because she no longer had a nest. Laura and the girls are going shopping in Chicago, September 5th. 8. While I'm no genius, I'm smart enough to have a master's degree in chemistry from one of the top 10 schools in the country, so I was able to figure it out. As devastating as this was for me, the only logical explanation is that Laura had a real romantic relationship with Piero Romano for at least 10 years, and that my daughters knew about it. Another interesting fact, from April 16th to 18, Chicago will host an exhibition of Piero's most famous and inspiring works, including works owned by private collectors, some of which have never been shown publicly before. This opportunity appeared 3 weeks after receiving the information, was discovered at that moment. I'm sure Laura was on a business trip to Chicago at the time, even though my birthday was on the 18th, and would likely have received the photos in the box since some items were shipped early. Come to our home. Never in my life have I been more interested in coming up with a plan to take care of my slobby wife and unfaithful daughter. Because of my initial anger, which I had to suppress in order to get what I wanted, I had to schedule a business trip for the night I discovered the offending information, and 2 more nights. After packing everything I needed for a 3-night stay at a local hotel, I left a message on Laura's work phone, apologizing profusely and promising to make amends. The first part of my plan was to prepare all the necessary divorce papers that would need to be filed once the expected evidence was received. The second part was to figure out how to get someone in Chicago to visit and photograph the exhibit on the first day, the 16th, but by invitation only. The third part is to spend as much material and money as possible to create a scandal about the divorce. I no longer care about my relationship with Laura, and I am very, very close to feeling the same about Grace and Angela. The fourth part is the final revenge, even after the final divorce. The first part is a prox. I received a recommendation from an excellent divorce attorney, Gail Schiff. She advised me on everything I should do, and although she gave irreconcilable differences as the reason, she was prepared to commit prolonged infidelity. Gail needed minimal evidence to file the paperwork. She expected to receive it on the morning of the 17th, and was able to convince law enforcement officials as well as the county sheriff to notify Laura and document the incident. Exhibition evening. In part 2, I collected as much information as I could about art appraisers associated with Chicago. I found a young appraiser named Roberto Milan who was trying to grow his business. In fact, I visited him in Chicago and talked to him most of the day. Roberto was generally familiar with Piero's work, was confident that he would receive an invitation to the opening on the 16th, and didn't mind being photographed with a small, expensive, slightly hidden HD camera that I thought would interest me. I gave him the photos, and he said he could give me a good high estimate of what to expect from the photos. A truly experienced appraiser could review my analysis, but I accept this challenge because it will help me become a real player in the field of art appraisal, were the last words that made me hire Roberto. For the third and fourth installments, I redeemed 2 bearer bonds that we had kept in bank vaults for at least 12 years. I don't remember if Laura actually knew, and I certainly don't remember now. Its total value is now about $25,000. For the remainder of Part 3, I provided my attorney with a complete list of all of our assets, including the valuation of our home. I photographed all of Laura's jewelry and the contents of our safe, minus the bearer bonds, of course, and provided my lawyer with updated bank statements, credit card numbers, current loans and purchases, retirement plans, and insurance accounts. A quick excerpt from Part 4. On my last day out of town, I snuck into the house while Laura was at work and used a magic marker to blur out my face in the dozen photos in Laura's album, recreated over the years. Having never seen them in their entirety, I was surprised by the small percentage of photographs included, no more than 15%. I also found 2 photographs that I had never seen before, and even if I had, I probably would have thought they were innocent. They were of Laura, Gina, Grace, Angela, and drumroll, Piero. I made high-quality scans and copies of the photos and saved them back into an album with a black marker, an arrow pointing to Piero, and the words Laura's Love of Life engraved. 2 days after returning from my business trip, Laura told me that she needed to go to Chicago from the morning of the 15th to the 19th. When I expressed my disappointment that she would not be able to spend my birthday with me, she suggested that she would go with me. She calmly objected, apparently planning my reaction, and said that this would not be a business and that at the next on weekends she will take me to a restaurant. At the station, renovation that you have never seen before. After these words, he kissed me passionately and then unzipped me. Laura rarely gave blowjobs, but when she did it with a passion I had never seen before. At the time, I thought she was a $3 bitch, so I just enjoyed it, holding her head to make sure she couldn't escape while I shot a gallon of cum into her mouth. She choked a little, seemingly sad, but pretended to be happy. "This is just a taste of what's to come, darling." The particularly dangerous part of my plan was parts 1, 3, and 4. As for the rest, especially after meeting and hiring an art appraiser, I was pretty sure everything would be okay. The most dangerous thing is to talk to Grace. I decided that I needed to talk to Grace in person, so after dropping Laura off at the airport on the morning of the 15th, I drove about 110 miles from Columbus to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, where Grace was studying chemical engineering. Why Grace and not Angela? Although both girls are more like their mothers than me, Grace is more like me than Angel, at least in terms of how her brain works. Neither Angela nor Laura could have imagined that I would study chemical engineering, which of course was very close to my chemistry degree. Grace also had a harder time lying than Angela or Laura, and while she didn't tell me that Laura's affair with Pierrot suggested otherwise, or maybe not, she was more concerned about the nuclear family than Angela was. Halfway there, I called Grace on her cell phone. He seemed really happy to see this man. I told him I would take him to a real restaurant for late lunch. We met at the restaurant he had chosen about a mile from campus and were given our own table. After we finished dinner, I said, "I need to talk to you about something very serious, Gracie." There was a confused expression on his face. "Are you okay, Dad?" "Physically, yes, but emotionally, despite the apparent ugliness, I'm a mess. But before I talk to you, I want you to promise not to leave until the day after my birthday. I'll tell everyone, including your mother and Angela." Before I asked, I said, "Do you promise?" He then raised his hands and made the "I swear" gesture. "Wow, that sounds serious," he gulped. "It's okay, Dad, I promise. I swear." He raised his hands and tried to smile. "I found out about your mother's affair with Piero Romano, and I'm thinking about divorce," I blurted out. "Oh no, Daddy," she exclaimed, covering her mouth with her hands as tears immediately streamed down her face. "There is only one hope. I need to know everything you know, and I need to take a DNA test." "What?" he exclaimed, on the verge of fainting. I saw that there were no seats in the restaurant. I told him to meet me outside, and after paying, we would go to my car. I found the waitress, tipped her $20, and found Grace still crying on the sidewalk. When we got into the car, I said, "Okay, Grace, turn around." Our family's survival depended on it. She cried for several minutes but could not say anything, and when I looked at her, she began to speak. It wasn't until I was 12 that I realized that my mother and Pierrot, or Uncle Pierrot as we'll call him, slept together, although we showed affection for each other every time we were in Chicago, especially at Christmas. I knew it from the comments. Angela claimed to have known this before, but I was not mature enough to understand it. You never know because it could mean the end of our family because you were too upset, is the word I think she was imagining. That's why I swore an oath of silence. Grace breaks down again for a moment and then continues. "I wanted it to end at Pierrot's funeral, and you'll never know." After she made a fool of herself in front of his coffin, I looked at her again. I told him that if he jumped into Pierrot's arms, someone else would tell you the whole story. He hit me and asked how I could think I was homeless. I loved Pierrot. I loved you and no one else. I just wanted to remember Pierrot. I believe this and pray that the day when they find her never comes, because I am sure that she will never have another romantic relationship or even a sexual relationship. I pressed her for more information until I realized that knowing more would be counterproductive. As expected, she remained in a state of fear when I asked her about the other reason for my visit. "I hope I can get through this with your mom, Grace. What you tell me will help me, but I need something. We need to do a DNA test to find out if you are my biological daughter." "No, father, no," he shouted. "You are my only father." "I know I'm your father," I replied, "but I need to know if I'm also your biological father. Here, Let me wipe your cheek. I'll change mine, and we'll apply it to the inside. Here's the envelope, I said, grabbing a large envelope from the back seat, and took it with me to the testing laboratory. She protested again, but eventually agreed. I cashed your check. Then I cleaned mine. I pretended to drop the sealed gasket on the floor of the car, then grabbed it from under the seat and replaced it. She never noticed it. I showed her the letter in an envelope addressed to the laboratory, and she saw that there were 2 containers of tampons in the envelope, and I sealed it. The email instructed me to send the results directly to me and Grace. As I was driving her back to campus, she saw me throwing envelopes into the express mailbox along the way. When we said goodbye, she begged, "Promise me that you will forgive Mom, and everything will be fine. Right now, I can't guarantee that because I don't lie like they do. However, you have done your part to increase the chances that it will work. Now remember, you won't be able to tell anyone about our conversation until the 19th, ASAP. I promised, he said, smiling. Then she stuttered, and, there's something else. I have to tell you. On your birthday, Mom and Angela are going to an exhibition of Pierrot's work in Chicago, and some of them are photographs of Mom's sayings. She was sorry that everything happened exactly like that, but she had to leave, because the works exhibited there were inherited by her in her will from Pierrot. Schools. I smiled as nonchalantly as I could and replied, I know. Thank you for your honesty. We kissed again and she left. She didn't see the tears I shed because she knew that my relationship with Angela was now as dead as my relationship with Laura. But I haven't decided yet whether I can save him and Grace. Grace didn't know that I had recorded our conversation in the car. Grace had no idea that anything could harm her, and that was part 4 of my plan. The stamp I put on the envelope originally belonged to me, an Italian-born janitor who worked in my office building and was a friend of mine for many years. As a birthday present, I agreed to pay for a paternity test. He didn't even ask me why I needed 3 samples instead of 1. I sent someone to check his background, and it turned out he was over 80% Italian with a little Eastern and Western European influence, which he liked. Why did I insert Italian DNA into the test subject instead of my own? Because I want him to hurt everyone. The reason I use Italian is that with a DNA test, even if you compare 2 groups, you can find out the origins of both participants. And since Piero is Italian, I want everyone to conclude that he is the father Italian lace. And, if I may ask, Angela. I begged Grace not to tell me. I spoke to her on the phone on the 16th and 18th, and she assured me that this was not the case. And since I had not heard from Laura, I was convinced that this was true. Around 23 o'clock on the 16th, Roberto Milan emailed me photos of the relevant parts of the Romano exhibition. They hurt me more than I thought. I looked at her sobbing and shaking like paper. This is a collage or series of 10 photographs that gradually increase in size from the first to the last. They all have a typical Roman character, including the wonderful Romano abilità artita effect of the last 2. The series is called Natalia Amore. What first broke my heart were the first 2 shots of the episode, where 2 girls stood in front of a photo of a woman who was undoubtedly Laura. Although the girls' faces, hair, clothes, a Christmas gift from my mother, and silhouettes appear bokeh, they are now suspected to be Angela and Grace, who are around 9 and 11 years old. In the second of the first 2 photos, one of Laura's breasts is exposed, and she gives a look that can only be described as, "fuck me." Over the next 3 episodes, Laura wears less and less clothing, until the final episode, where she is naked and clearly playing with herself, although her hand cannot be seen touching her pussy. The second episode again opens with a photo of the girls in the background, this time a little older, and the last 4 shots become increasingly risque until the penultimate shot shows Laura posing in extremely sexy frontal nude poses, the last one clearly suggesting that she is just fucked and in post-coital bliss. After burping, drinking ginger beer, and crying, I looked at the photos again. If they weren't breaking my heart, I'd say the last 2 photos are probably the best of their kind I've ever seen. I've read the text accompanying Roberto Milan's report. I'm so sorry, I know this will be hard for you. The collection is worth at least $300,000, but likely $500,000. If sold individually, the penultimate photograph could fetch between $125,000 and $175,000. The last 2 images best represent the impact that Roman artists have had on history, not only in my opinion, but also in the opinion of at least 4 other art historians and critics that I have heard of. I asked, "Do you have any of Gina's things for sale?" It's no surprise that she put me in touch with Pierrot's owner at will, Laura. Laura said they weren't for sale now because they were priceless and said, "The 4 completely nude garments will not be sold until his, I don't want the public and especially my husband to see me like this while I'm alive," she said, laughing. Even if she had done her job, she could probably rip my balls off. "I wrote this," were the last words of his letter, followed by a frowning emoji. I sent a digital version of what Grace said, along with photos and Roberto's text, to my lawyer, Gail Schiff. He called me on the 17th at 7:30 a.m. "Of course, you are right in filing for divorce due to adultery. Laura will be questioned by the police at the party tomorrow night." "I want to add one more thing," I said. "I will give it to your legal representative along with the divorce papers." I gave Gail the envelope addressed to Angela. The envelope contained my letter, a cheek swab from the Italian concierge, a container of a new swab, and an express mail envelope addressed to the DNA lab with instructions. My letter to Angela looks like this. "Angela, if there is any hope for a relationship between you and me in the future, there is one thing you must do for me. You must remove the stick from the inside of your cheek and place it in an envelope labeled DNA lab, which contains my wand, and then mail the envelope overnight. As you will see, the lab is tasked with sending the results directly to you and me at the school. You may not want a relationship with me in the future. However, you will still have to do what I ask, because if you don't, I will make sure that our money will last you for many years, and you can say goodbye to tuition, housing and rent, and eventually, your 3rd year. The cost is for 1 year plus the final year of study at an expensive private university. Therefore, even if you hate me as evidenced by your past actions and inactions towards me, it is in your best interest to do what I ask." Grace accepted this request. Du Padre, Grant Oster. I'm glad something happened on my birthday in Chicago without me being there. Lawyers told Gail that Laura and Angela were smiling as they danced with the crowd around 9 p.m. On the 18th, they were surprised when the police handed them an envelope and their legal representative took a photo with it. They immediately opened the envelope. The police left, but the lead lawyer stopped and took a few more photos before taking him away. The photos she emailed to Gail and Gail sent to me show Laura sinking deeper and deeper into the ground, falling into the fetal position, and Angela getting upset, then angry, and then trying to take care of her by laying her down sleep. Mother below? "Really ruining the holiday?" Followed by a smiling emoji, was the lawyer's final cryptic comment on the images sent by email. Angela called me on the morning of the 19th. After expressing my dissatisfaction with the way she handed out the documents, I replied, "Too bad, naughty bitch. Tell someone who cares," which is something I had never said to her before. "I'm not very comfortable with the DNA issue," she said. "Would you rather know who your biological father is than that idiot who stood next to you at all those hearings?" I asked sarcastically. "You are my father," she replied. "Maybe, maybe not," I replied. "However, one thing is certain. My lawyer has frozen all my and my mother's accounts, and I can assure you that in the future, you will no longer have money for school or even tuition. I was 20. Unless you send this envelope along with a stick to your cheek. Come to think of it, given all the lies you've told me over the years, I need a video of you wiping your cheek and putting it in an envelope and mailing it, all happening at the same time. Trust me. This is cruel. I'm not kidding," he growled. "Oh, really?" I laughed. "But you're not telling the whole truth, are you? Your sister has repented and they're going to pay for her education. You're obviously a bastard just like your mother, so I'm not going to waste my time. I'm telling you this because it makes me sick. Either you do as I say and email me the video, or this will be the last time we talk." At this point, I hung up. Landline phones are fine there too, and you can make a statement by picking up the phone rather than just pressing the red button on the phone. This hateful bitch didn't call me from the 18th to the 21st. She probably delayed her return to Columbus by 2 days because she felt sorry for her partner, Gina. Enthusiasm for the 18th exhibition was covered not only by 2 major Chicago newspapers, but also by 2 national art publications. Each image featured a photograph of Laura lying down, apparently sold by the server. Sometimes I laugh out loud when I feel the need to empty my stomach. Apparently this bad bitch came to the house on the 22nd. For me, this is no longer my home. I only know this because the decoration I left on my new front door, a steel decoration with a reinforced frame and a modified lock, like the side and back doors, is no longer there, and my lawyer left it in my envelope. It remains. We need a phone to talk. The envelope said, fucking whore, and I thought Laura knew it was her. My internal message was short. Hey, honey, have your lawyer contact me and find out when you can get your things back. The sooner we sell the house and end this sham marriage, the better. I'll arrest you. Live in this house again until it is sold. Do something decent for the first time in our ridiculous relationship. Don't worry. Not that you did this for any reason other than financial because you don't love or respect me. Her previously unknown ex-boyfriend, Grant P.S. The door is securely locked. Any unauthorized entry will result in the burning of all your past family photo albums. Lawyers had to appear in court to clarify some aspects of living conditions. If he hadn't written the note on that bitch's note, he might have gotten what he wanted. But there was nothing he could do. Through our lawyers, we eventually agreed to immediately vacate the house and put it up for sale, with temporary living expenses included in the division of the property. Laura tried to be tough in financial negotiations, but she had no negotiating skills because she received her precious photo from Piero while we were still married. According to her lawyer, when I asked her for 5 photos, she could choose one, then me, and so on until 10 photos were separated. She became hysterical, especially because she saw that the family photo album had been tampered with. At Laura's insistence, we arranged for Roberto's photographs to be appraised, one by her and the other by a neutral appraiser. It is curious that Roberto's offer was the lowest. It cost him $200,000 more than he accepted. Since this significantly limited his final result, he sent me 2 photographs that he selected himself. But when I asked my lawyer to tell him that I agreed for him to take these items to the local shooting range and see what he did with them, he withdrew his offer. In the end, when the divorce was finalized, Laura was left with her personal belongings, including all the albums. She was furious that I didn't want them, half the furniture and a quarter of the sale price. House, nothing extra, maintenance costs not included, but a probationary period, more on that later. We agreed to share all of Grace and Angela's college expenses until they graduated, but nothing more. As for Angela and Grace, the DNA test results were as expected. They are not my biological daughters. Laura almost had a stroke. I told Grace about this, not Angela, and she had just accepted my offer to pay for college and seemed happy that I wouldn't be in a relationship in the future. Dad, Mom said it didn't turn out very well. He said that although he married you, he never slept with anyone other than you and Piero, and never met me before I was born, Piero. So why is your father like Piero of Italian origin and my whole family is Dutch? Your mother lied to me about her love for 24 years and turned out to be a pathological liar. Why, after so many years of dating, do you think that everything she says is true? He said he wanted another DNA test. That won't happen because you are not minor children, and this has nothing to do with the divorce. I just want to know the truth of my thoughts and tell you and Angela the truth. Besides, you saw me brushing my cheeks. I'm something I coded the envelope and sent it myself. Mom and Dad would also like to talk to you individually. She said she made this request several times through her lawyer, but she's not even sure if the lawyer gave her that information because she never received a response. He didn't get a response because I told my lawyer to ignore his request. Why the hell should I talk to this bastard? Dad, please don't call me that. Despite his flaws, I still love him. I'm asking you to do me a favor and talk to him for an hour, please. I'm so sorry, Grace. It's just not possible. I have forgiven you and want a relationship with you, but there is nothing, and I am not saying anything, that makes me want him to talk. Now let's talk about Laura's probationary period and the fact that she only receives a quarter of the proceeds from the sale of the house. After I called Grace about the DNA test and Laura asked me to talk to me, she did something stupid. I thought she might get something out of it, so I joined in and walked around with a panic button connected directly to the private security company. One night, a woman knocked on the door of the apartment I was renting while I was going through divorce proceedings until the final financial details were settled. I looked through the peephole and didn't see 2 large men or Laura standing next to me. Ding. As soon as I opened the door, 2 big guys ran in and grabbed me, but not before I managed to press the silent panic button. When they grabbed me, they dragged me to a chair and tied me there, while Laura walked in and the other woman ran away. Grant, I'm sorry I had to do this, but you refused to meet with me or repeat the DNA test that we both knew was false. Then he started talking funny nonsense, saying that he had always loved me, that he loved Pierrot very much, and that his heart was big enough for both of us. He realized that it was time for us to make peace, but he just wanted to get rid of his feelings. She was holding a tampon while talking to me. It was clear that he wanted to force a DNA test on me. I didn't verbally respond to what she said, and that made her very angry. I refused to even acknowledge his presence and tried my best to avoid eye contact. Luckily, just as two of his henchmen opened my mouth to take a DNA sample, my panic button went off. The security company called the police, and 3 officers burst into the house with guns drawn. I was found tied up, and one of the attackers had an illegal weapon in his pocket. I explained the situation, and the police pointed their guns at the 3. The police ignored Laura's pleas to let them go, they meant no harm, and arrested 3 people. A little kidnapping won't help the judges in our divorce proceedings. I understood the above asset allocation and other considerations after she made it clear that it would be very bad for Laura if she ruled. The Crown Court took pity on Laura as it was her first offense. She was sentenced to 2 years probation and a $10,000 fine, only for her share of the family property. Life is not easy for these 2 boys as they have a dark past. A person is eligible for parole after 1 year in prison, and a person in possession of an illegal firearm is eligible for parole after 5 years. The 4th part of my project did not end with the divorce being finalized, although I will not admit here or anywhere else that I had anything to do with it. Every time someone asks me this question, I say, it's just karma. 18 months after my divorce was finalized, I was on a Caribbean cruise with an attractive little 32-year-old divorcee who loved to be treated well and generously and loved even more to be loved. She was too much like Laura at that age and too passionate for me to want a long-term relationship with her, but she was fun to be around, even if I got bored with her. During sex on a cruise ship, Laura's apartment was broken into while she was at work. This place is in ruins. Several items were stolen, including the second most provocative and valuable photograph of Romano, taken by Laura. The most valuable and provocative photograph was on long-term loan from an art gallery, so it was not in his apartment. But more items were destroyed than stolen, including 7 of the 8 remaining photographs of Romano and all but the 2 oldest family albums. Of course, when I returned, I was suspicious. Of course, I couldn't do it myself since I was on a boat 3,000 miles away, but Laura insisted that the police pay someone to do it. When the police immediately approached me and asked questions indicating that I was a suspect, I refused to talk to them and hired a criminal lawyer. After checking my phone and financial records, except of course for the 2 canceled bondholders that were never included in the divorce agreement, they found no indication that I could pay them anything either. I can pay them all. Anyone who knows how to do what is being done can find a connection with them. I got the distinct impression that 6 months after her first contact with me, the police had all but given up, although I'm sure Laura continued to harass them. When the statute of limitations expired, I threw a party. Most of my finally done nights come from friends. My parents are no longer alive, but I am survived by my brother, his wife, my 2 nieces, my new lover, Melody, a widow my age, my 2 adult children, Melody and Grace, her husband, and my granddaughter, my daughter. I didn't have a relationship with Angela at that time, and I still don't. I wasn't invited to their wedding, and even if I was, I wouldn't go. But Grace told me that Angela's husband had discovered she was cheating on her and was in the early stages of divorce proceedings. Laura gave Grace an ultimatum: stop all contact with me, otherwise she will do it. To everyone's surprise, including mine, she chose me, perhaps because she was convinced that Laura, as she described her, was a pathological liar. More importantly, Grace realizes how terrible it is for her mother to abandon her relationship with her lover in front of her daughter and allow her to lie to cover up her infidelity. Grace did not want this attitude to affect her children. There's only been one incident in the past 5 years that has caused tension between Grace and me. I told the truth about the DNA test. She was angry at me at first, but then she forgave me, just as I forgave her duplicity over the years, and was actually happy that her biological father was with her. I did another DNA test to confirm this. Practical. I think Laura moved to Chicago, but I'm not sure. And more importantly, I don't care.